welcome to our candidate interview. We're delighted to have you here. Why don't you tell the audience who you are?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. My name is Judith Kurtz. I'm running for one of the City Council at-large seats in the upcoming election.
And where do you live?
I live in Ward 5 up on Ridge Road.
And how long have you lived in Concord?
So my husband and my 2 children and I have lived in Concord for about 4.5 years. We were looking for a place to put down roots, and we chose Concord, and this is it for us, our forever home. We're glad to be here.
Great. Where were you before you hit Concord?
We had lived around the Northeast for my husband's training as a surgeon, and so once we got the opportunity to decide where we were going to live, to actually make that choice, this is where we landed.
All right. And what civic activities have you been involved in here in Concord?
Here in Concord, I have been volunteering with the Concord Green Space Coalition. I'm vice president of that board and have been involved with several of the legs of the 3-legged stool that makes up Concord Green Space, particularly equitable development and local climate action. But we also have worked collaboratively on sustainable development goals for the city. I've also volunteered around common sense gun laws at the state level.
Okay, great. We sent you some questions in advance, so you have a chance to give a little thought to them, but the audience may know what they are, so I'm going to read this one to you.
Sounds good.
Do you think growth in the tax base is an issue here in Concord? And if so, what would you recommend or do to foster strong economic growth to keep our tax burden manageable?
Absolutely. Well, I have been canvassing, and I've heard from everyone I've talked to that this is a concern. Of course, we're all trying to stay in our homes and keep our finances manageable. We have an interesting challenge that we have a New Hampshire state property tax model that places a burden, but as a municipality, we have to think creatively about what we can do. And these kinds of conversations with developers and those who draw businesses in are a huge part of making progress in that way. I'd like to look at capitalizing on the amazing revitalization of Main Street, maybe looking at a second floor strategy. How can we really double down on that? And I'd also be curious about looking at Loudon Road and ways to make that a more desirable and safe corridor for businesses and residents and alike.
So one of the challenges of second floor, a little bit of an adjunct to that, is we have codes in Concord, some of the strictest and best enforced codes on building, and one of the challenges, a lot of the old buildings don't meet codes. Then you find it's very expensive to upgrade to codes, and for some reason we seem to have had difficulty developing those second floors. So would you advocate, for example, that the city look at relaxing some of those codes or changing them?
I wouldn't use the word relaxing, because I think that makes people scared that we're going to throw out what we love about Concord and the charm of it. But I think evaluating our code and looking very carefully about writing code that allows us to grow as we need to while maintaining the charm and character is overdue in the city. The planning department has been working on changes to zoning, and we really need to revisit our master plan. So I would absolutely support moving forward with both of those things.
And do you think those will be enough? By way of example, you'd need to build about 12 Hilton True hotels every year to keep your tax rate growing at only 3%.
Right.
That's a tall order.
It is a tall order.
And do you think that what you're advocating would be enough?
I don't think it'll be enough. I think it's part of the strategy. I think collaborating with folks like you is what we also need to do. I'm not the expert in development, Steve.
Neither, by the way, neither am I. I hate to say it, neither am I.
Well, no, I'm not just being glib and trying to redirect the question. I really think that what we need to do as a city is bring people together around the table. The work that the Chamber does is incredible, and I would love to be a part of more conversations about how we take a multi-pronged approach to offset exactly the concern that you're talking about.
Let's move on to affordable housing. As you know, we have a shortage statewide, a big shortage here. It's impacting employment. And everybody, Mark Twain used to say, everybody complains about the weather, but nobody does anything about it to sort of accentuate there are some issues that are hard to solve. Everybody talks about let's increase density and let's have accessory dwelling units and all that. But given that land cost is 10 to 15% of a development, that's just like trimming at the margin. Do you think it's a problem? I think everybody does. You'd have to have been absent from the
to tell you it's not a problem.
What ideas do you have to help Concord increase the workforce housing we need?
So I have been asking around about that, especially in response to your question, where you said zoning's not good enough, Judith. Give me a better answer. So I started doing my
All right,
research,
good.
and I have to admit, again, I am just learning about this. So a couple of ideas. We just talked about code, and so if we're changing code to incentivize housing projects that are mixed use, and so we are offsetting the housing cost with some business interests. I think that that's absolutely the direction that we need to go. And also, I would just push back a teeny bit. Concord has a lot of housing projects going on. It's not enough, and we know that, but I'd like to continue the relationships that Concord, the city of Concord, has already established.
All righty. Well, let's switch to homelessness, which has been in the paper. You know, the homelessness problem seems to be growing everywhere in the country, in the state. It migrates to the city. I don't read about much of a homeless problem in Bow or Hopkinton or Canterbury. Those problems get sent to Concord. And we've heard about the great efforts of all the different not-for-profit groups and Housing First as an option, but those aren't anywhere near keeping up with the problem.
Right.
And I think we know that it's everywhere in every neighborhood. It's negatively impacting property values, concerns about safety, health of the people who are homeless. What ideas do you have there?
Well, first of all, I think that we do have an amazing number of organizations working on this issue in the city, including our public safety officers, our first responders, the hospital, and then all of the nonprofits. We have a steering committee at the city level that has been monitoring the problem, and I think that we really need to identify a leader to get all of these organizations to work together. I think each of them in their own right is doing good work, but we're not going to tackle this problem in any real way without a collaborative effort. So I would like to see the city take a lead on that and really, whether or not the city becomes the steering committee of these many organizations or reaches out and says we would like to establish and has someone come forward from those organizations. That's the first step. Simultaneously, I know that people are scared, and so we have to support public safety, because if we can make sure that we are properly staffed, which we are not currently at our current levels, then we have officers to deal with criminal elements. And that allows us to put resources towards unhoused individuals who really want an opportunity to get themselves back on their feet. And if we're not stretched too thin, then potentially we can do that. I'm really curious about what the new social work position and the force will be able to do in terms of redirecting folks to resources and sort of separating out criminal and safety issues from mental health and addiction.
All that's great, but we're not building Housing First units fast enough to keep up with the problem. It's been very difficult to get private landlords to do it, because if you do take in a homeless person and they don't get 24/7 monitoring, which nobody can afford or has been able to do, notwithstanding Herculean efforts by groups, then that hurts that business's reputation, then they won't do it again. Do you really think just having a coordinator there and trying to get everybody to do kumbaya is going to be enough?
Well, I think that was a little dismissive to call it kumbaya.
Well, I used to serve on it for 5 years, so maybe a little cred there.
I do think bringing all of the experts together in one spot is valuable, but I would turn it around a little bit. Like, you're a developer. What could we as a city do to entice you or someone in a similar position to you to build the kind of housing that we need to actively place people through a Housing First model? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's the million-dollar question.
It is. The short answer is housing costs are so expensive, it's virtually impossible to do. The only area they've been very successful is the veterans ending homelessness, because the federal government has sustained it. Anyway, let's move on and talk about tourism. Do you think it should be part of the economic growth strategy? And if so, what would you do to increase tourism? Because we have thousands of cars driving by the highway and nobody seems to notice Concord.
Yes, I think we should have tourism. So I grew up outside of Burlington, Vermont, and I've seen what a
Never heard of it. Where's that?
Seen what a revitalized waterfront can do for a community. It really changed over the course of my life. And we have this amazing natural resource of the Merrimack running right through Concord and right along a good stretch of I-93. There's so much that we can do to capitalize on that. So I would say the city's proposed Kiwanis Park project, the Merrimack River Greenway trails, those are great, good steps towards creating some infrastructure that highlights the river. The Sunflower Farm project drew in 15,000 people in its inaugural festival, and that's a great example of taking land that was sitting underutilized and turning it into a tourist attraction. We have an amazing amount of diversity in Concord. If you've been to the Multicultural Festival, we have artisans, artists, performers, and tons of food. And if we can find ways to encourage entrepreneurship among those folks for some economic development and have them be tourist draw, that would be great. And then finally, and I probably should have led with this, we are one of the capital cities. It's crazy to me that we aren't doing more. And of course, we have to collaborate with the state for this, but we have the State House. We have a wealth of history. That alone should be a tourist draw. So I think that given that so much city land is state-occupied land, we should find ways to leverage that for the benefit of the city.
The city of Portsmouth, before you moved here in the late 70s, had no tourism. It was a very tough town, dangerous town. People didn't go there. The city has, for 45 years, made a direct investment into the Chamber of Commerce to promote tourism, and now you can't park within a mile of anything
Now
downtown.
you want to go there every
So
weekend.
would you support the idea of the city directly supporting the Chamber or in-town Concord or other groups that promote tourism?
Yes,
All right, great.
I would.
Perfect. Let's move on and talk about the fact that we have all these thousands of cars that we can't get to come off the highway and enjoy the Sunflower Festival or the Multicultural Festival. And there have been some who've said, well, we just haven't kept up the investment in downtown since we did the big project, and that we do not present a very friendly face. When you drive through Manchester at night,
Right.
it's colorful, it's well-lit, it's vibrant, it attracts your interest. You drive by Concord, you wonder if they can't afford to pay the bill to light the State House because it's sort of dusky.
Right.
Do you think that's a problem? What would you do to make our appearance to the 20,000 people going by every day better?
I do think it's a problem, sadly. I think it's connected to what we were just talking about. So it makes me crazy that people drive through and don't stop. I see it as such a missed opportunity. Stop here for lunch on your way up to ski, right? Like,
But we look dangerous and black and dark,
I
you know?
understand. So yes, this is a place where we should absolutely invest some money. And I think some of the things that we can think about, perhaps we do need to think about extending the revitalization, of Main Street, right? Thinking about architecture that looks inviting from both sides, not just from the Main Street side. We can use art installations, murals to beautify things. Lighting seems like an obvious choice. As new development goes up, architecture that draws the eye either towards a developed waterfront on the river or that sort of features the State House seem like natural ways to make things look better. It's a gateway to the city, and we've got to invest in that.
So when the Hotel Concord came forward with their lighting project, there was great controversy. There's still, in Concord, we resolved controversies and then just keep debating them for decades after about whether we should have done Main Street over. Do you think that was a good idea, that kind of lighting project?
I think it's beautiful.
Great. Well, thanks very much. Good luck in your campaign.
Thank
We're going to
you.
get this word out, and thank you for participating.
Thanks. I look forward to more
Yeah.
conversations with
Good
you,
luck.
Steve.
Thank you.
So much.